She never imagined betrayal would come from within her own home. But when she uncovered the truth, she knew there was no turning back. From the outside, Maria had everything: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a close-knit family. She had married Mark nearly 15 years ago, and they had built a life together that many would envy. Mark was charming, successful, and attentive, a man who seemed to have it all. He was Maria's rock, someone she believed she could always count on. Their marriage, though not without its ups and downs, had weathered the storms of life, or so Maria thought. Their family was unique. Mark had brought his daughter, Emma, into their marriage, a daughter from a previous relationship. Maria, unable to have children of her own, had embraced Emma as her own. From a young age, Maria had nurtured Emma, pouring her heart into being the best stepmother she could be. She watched Emma grow from a shy girl into a confident young woman, and she had been proud to be part of that transformation. The bond between Maria and Emma was special, or so it seemed. Maria never treated Emma any differently than she would have treated her own child. She was involved in every aspect of Emma's life: her school, hobbies, and even her personal struggles. To Maria, Emma was more than just a stepdaughter. She was the daughter she had always dreamed of. But as Emma grew older, Maria began to notice subtle changes. The once open relationship between them seemed to shift. Emma, who had once shared everything with Maria, began to distance herself. The late-night conversations dwindled. Maria brushed it off as teenage angst, trusting in the family she had worked so hard to build. But the signs were there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. Maria's life took a turn when she stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to see. It was a rainy afternoon, and Mark had left for work early, leaving his phone behind. Maria had never been one to snoop. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. But something compelled her to pick up the phone. Perhaps it was that nagging feeling that had been gnawing at her for weeks. Or maybe it was just a moment of curiosity. Whatever it was, it led her to a discovery that would shatter her world. As she swiped through Mark's messages, her heart raced. Most of the messages were mundane, work-related conversations, reminders about errands. But then she saw a name that made her pause: Emma. The message thread was long, with dozens of texts exchanged in the early hours of the morning when Maria was asleep. At first, the messages seemed innocent enough: discussions about school, Emma's plans for the weekend. But as Maria scrolled further, the tone of the conversation shifted. Her breath caught in her throat as she read words that made her stomach churn. "I miss you," Mark had written. "I can't wait to see you tonight." Emma's replies were equally affectionate, laced with a familiarity that went far beyond a father-daughter relationship. The playful banter, the inside jokes. Maria had seen this type of interaction before, but never between them. A cold chill ran down Maria's spine as the realization dawned on her. These weren't just messages between a father and his daughter. They were the texts of two people who were far too close, too intimate. Maria felt her hands start to shake as she continued to read, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. The messages grew more explicit, more revealing. There were plans to meet in secret, references to times they had been together when Maria was not around. The words on the screen blurred as tears welled up in Maria's eyes. She could hardly believe what she was reading. This wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal that struck at the very core of her family. Maria dropped the phone, her mind reeling. She felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Everything she had believed, everything she had trusted, was a lie. The man she loved, the daughter she had raised, were involved in something that was both unimaginable and unforgivable. The shock was overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by something darker, something Maria had never felt before: rage. Her world had just crumbled, but Maria wasn't the type to be crushed easily. She was hurt, yes, but as the initial wave of pain subsided, a steely resolve began to take its place. If Mark and Emma thought they could betray her and go on living their lives without consequences, they were wrong, very wrong. Maria was a woman who believed in justice, but the betrayal she had uncovered made her question everything she had ever stood for. How could the people she loved the most, the people she had sacrificed so much for, deceive her so completely? The pain was raw and the anger was consuming, but Maria knew that acting out of blind rage would do her no good. If she was going to confront Mark and Emma, she needed to be calm, calculated, and in control. For the next few days, Maria went about her life as if nothing had happened. She smiled when Mark came home, engaged in polite conversation at the dinner table, and even laughed at Emma's jokes. But beneath the surface, she was carefully plotting her next move. Maria knew that confronting them without proof would be futile. They would deny it, gaslight her, and turn the blame around. No, she needed to be smarter than that. She needed undeniable evidence, and she needed a plan. The first step was to gather more information. Maria began paying closer attention to Mark's and Emma's behavior, noticing the subtle signs she had previously overlooked. Mark's frequent late-night work calls that always seemed to happen when Emma was around. The way Emma avoided eye contact when Maria asked about her day, and the sudden hush that fell over the house whenever Maria entered a room. At night, when Mark was asleep, Maria would quietly slip out of bed and retrieve his phone. She would read through his messages, taking screenshots of the most damning conversations. She searched through his emails, looked at his call logs, and even checked his location history. The more she uncovered, the more disgusted she became. Every new piece of evidence was like a knife to her heart, but Maria forced herself to keep going. She needed to be sure, to have every detail, every piece of the puzzle before she made her move. Maria also began monitoring Emma more closely. She noticed that Emma was often out of the house at odd hours, claiming to be with friends or at the library. But Maria knew better. She started following Emma, keeping her distance, and observing where she went. It wasn't long before she caught Emma and Mark together, meeting at a secluded spot far from home. The sight of them together, laughing and holding hands, made Maria's blood boil. But still, she remained calm. Her time would come. Each piece of evidence Maria gathered was meticulously stored away, hidden in a folder on her computer, labeled innocuously as work files. She knew that when the time came, this evidence would be her weapon. Her proof that she had been wronged, her justification for what she was about to do. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal. Maria's emotions were a storm raging inside her, but outwardly she was the picture of composure. She continued her daily routines, cooked dinner for her family, and even planned a weekend getaway for Mark and Emma, something they had done every year as a family. But this time, it was different. This time, Maria had a plan. The weekend getaway would be her opportunity. Away from the prying eyes of neighbors and friends, in a remote location where no one would hear them scream, Maria would confront Mark and Emma. She would lay out all the evidence she had gathered, expose their lies, and demand the truth. And then she would decide their fate. The weekend arrived, and Maria played her part flawlessly. She packed their bags, prepared snacks for the road, and even made sure Emma's favorite music was playing in the car. Mark seemed oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. He was in high spirits, excited about the trip, and completely unaware that this would be a weekend he would never forget. They arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon. It was a secluded place, nestled deep in the woods, far from any other houses or towns, the perfect spot for a quiet retreat, or for something much darker. Maria had chosen the location carefully, knowing that there would be no interruptions, no chance of escape. This was where the truth would come out, and this was where Maria would get her revenge. As the evening drew in, Maria suggested they start a fire and gather around for some family time. Mark and Emma readily agreed, oblivious to the fact that Maria's calm demeanor was a mask hiding the turmoil inside her. They sat around the fire talking and laughing, while Maria silently observed them, her mind racing with the thoughts of what was to come. After dinner, as the fire crackled and the night deepened, Maria decided it was time. She poured everyone a glass of wine, raising a toast to family, the word dripping with irony. They clinked glasses and Maria watched as they took sips, completely unaware of the metaphorical bomb she was about to drop. So Maria began, her voice steady and calm. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you both." Mark looked up from his glass, a slight frown creasing his brow. Emma glanced at Maria, her eyes wary. "What is it, love?" Mark asked, his voice filled with the concern of a husband who believed his wife was the one person in the world he could trust completely. Maria set her glass down on the table, leaning forward slightly. "I've been wondering about the two of you," she said, her tone casual, almost as if she were discussing the weather. "You seem close, closer than most fathers and daughters." A heavy silence fell over the room. Mark's eyes widened slightly, and Emma's face turned pale. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted, the warmth from the fire no longer enough to chase away the cold that had suddenly settled in. "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, you know exactly what I mean, Emma. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of papers, the screenshots of the messages, the evidence she had so carefully gathered. She tossed them onto the table in front of Mark and Emma, watching as their faces drained of color. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Mark's hands trembled as he reached for the papers. The realization of what Maria had discovered hit him like a ton of bricks. He rifled through the screenshots, his eyes growing wider with each passing second. Emma sat frozen, her face a mask of shock and fear, unable to look up as her darkest secret was laid bare. "Maria, I can explain," Mark stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his guilt. But Maria had no intention of letting him wriggle out of this one. "Explain?" Maria's voice was icy, cutting through the thick tension in the room. "Explain how you could betray me, how you could do this, to me, to our family." Her words were sharp, each one a dagger aimed straight at Mark's heart. I didn't mean for it to happen," Mark stuttered, desperately trying to find the words that could somehow make this situation better, though he knew deep down that nothing he said could undo the damage that had been done. "Didn't mean for it to happen?" Maria repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. "You didn't mean to have an affair with your stepdaughter? You didn't mean to deceive me, lie to me, destroy everything we built together?" Emma finally spoke, her voice quivering. "Maria, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know how it happened, but—" "Don't," Maria interrupted, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and betrayal. "Don't you dare try to justify this. You were like a daughter to me, Emma. I loved you, trusted you, and this is how you repay me?" The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room as Maria's fury washed over them. Mark and Emma sat in stunned silence, unable to meet her gaze, knowing that no apology, no explanation could ever make up for what they had done. But Maria wasn't finished. She had spent days preparing for this moment, and she wasn't about to let them off easy. She wanted them to feel the full force of her pain, to understand just how deeply they had wounded her. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me?" Maria's voice wavered slightly, but she quickly regained control, her anger fueling her words. "Do you have any idea how it feels to be betrayed by the two people you love most in the world?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but Maria blinked them away. She had vowed not to cry in front of them, not to show any weakness. This was her moment of power, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. "Maria, please," Mark pleaded, his voice desperate. "We can work through this, I swear. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me." But Maria shook her head. "There's no working through this, Mark. You made your choice when you decided to betray me with her, and now you're going to face the consequences." The room was thick with tension as Maria's words hung in the air. Mark and Emma exchanged a panicked glance, each realizing that they were now at Maria's mercy. The power dynamic had shifted, and Maria was now firmly in control. Maria stood up, slowly pacing around the room as she gathered her thoughts. She could see the fear in their eyes, the way their faces had gone pale, and it gave her a twisted sense of satisfaction. They had made her feel powerless, trapped in a web of lies. But now she was the one holding the strings. "I've been thinking a lot about what to do with the two of you," Maria began, her voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of cold resolve. "You see, it's not enough for me to just walk away. That would be too easy for you both. You'd get to move on, pretend like nothing happened. No, I want you to understand the depth of the pain you've caused me, and I want you to feel it too." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but Maria silenced him with a sharp look. "Don't even try, Mark. You lost the right to defend yourself the moment you decided to betray me." She turned her attention to Emma, who had been sitting silently, her head bowed in shame. "And you, Emma, you were like a daughter to me. I gave you everything I had, my love, my support, my trust. But you threw it all away. You thought you could have it all. My husband, my life. But you were wrong." Emma looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Maria, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted it to go this far. I was confused. Confused?" Maria spat, her anger flaring up again. "You were selfish, Emma. You didn't care about me, about how this would destroy our family. All you cared about was yourself." Emma's tears flowed freely now, but Maria felt no sympathy. Her heart had hardened, her emotions numbed by the magnitude of the betrayal she had endured. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about retribution. I've decided, Maria continued, her voice steady once more, that I'm not going to let you off easy. You're going to live with this, just as I will. But first, you're going to face the truth, your truth, and you're going to do it together. Mark and Emma exchanged another fearful glance, unsure of what Maria meant. But Maria wasn't about to explain. She had something in mind, something that would make them understand the gravity of their actions. She reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a small digital recorder. She placed it on the table between them, her eyes never leaving their faces. This, she said, tapping the recorder, is going to record everything. I want you both to tell the truth, right here, right now. I want you to confess to everything, how it started, how it happened, and how you thought you could get away with it. And then I want you to listen to it over and over again until you fully comprehend what you've done. Mark's face turned ashen. Maria, please. This isn't necessary. Oh, it's necessary, Maria interrupted, her voice cold and unyielding. You owe me that much at least. You owe me the truth. The recorder sat ominously on the table, a symbol of the reckoning that was about to take place. Mark and Emma looked at each other, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on them, knowing that there was no escape from the consequences that Maria was about to unleash. The room was silent, except for the crackling of the fire, as Mark and Emma sat across from Maria. The small recorder on the table seemed to grow larger in their minds, an object of dread that would seal their fate. Maria's eyes bore into them, demanding the truth that had been hidden for so long. Start talking, Maria commanded, her voice leaving no room for hesitation. Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry as he tried to find the words. It started last year, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how it happened, Maria. I was weak. We were going through a rough patch, and Emma was there. She was comforting me. Maria's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. Comforting you? Is that what you call it? Mark flinched at the venom in her voice, but he pressed on. It was never supposed to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, Maria. I felt so lost, and Emma, she made me feel needed. Emma's sobs grew louder as Mark spoke, each word a reminder of the betrayal they had committed together. She buried her face in her hands, unable to look at Maria. And you, Emma? Maria's voice was sharp as she turned her attention to the young woman. What excuse do you have? Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Maria, she whispered. I don't know what came over me. I was angry, confused, and then one day it just happened. I never meant to betray you, I swear. Lies, Maria spat, her voice filled with disgust. You both knew exactly what you were doing. You had chances to stop, but you didn't. You continued, knowing the pain it would cause, and now you're sitting here, trying to justify it? Trying to make it seem like it was some kind of mistake? Maria's words cut through the air like a blade, leaving Mark and Emma reeling. There was no escape from the truth now. They had confessed, and there was no turning back. Keep going, Maria ordered. I want to hear everything, every detail, every lie, every moment you spent together behind my back. Mark's shoulders slumped, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him as he continued. He spoke of the late-night meetings, the stolen moments when Maria was out of the house, the lies they told to cover their tracks. Each word was a blow to Maria's heart, but she forced herself to listen, to absorb every detail of their betrayal. Emma spoke too, her voice shaking as she described how she had fallen for Mark, how she had convinced herself that what they were doing wasn't wrong, that it was somehow justified by the feelings they had for each other. But as they spoke, Maria's resolve only hardened. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about making them face the reality of their actions, to see the destruction they had wrought on her life, and to ensure that they would never forget the pain they had caused. When they finally finished, the room was thick with the weight of their confessions. Maria sat in silence for a moment, her gaze fixed on the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. Now you understand, Maria said quietly, her voice filled with a cold, steely resolve. Now you understand why I can't forgive you, why I can't just walk away. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but Maria held up a hand, silencing him. You've said enough. Now it's my turn. Maria reached for the recorder, pressing the stop button with a sense of finality. She picked it up, holding it in her hand as she turned to face them, her expression unreadable. You see, Maria began, her voice calm and measured. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be betrayed, about what it means to lose everything you thought you could trust. And I've realized something. Betrayal isn't just about the act itself. It's about the power it gives the betrayer over the one they've wronged. She looked at Mark, then at Emma, her eyes cold. You both thought you had power over me. You thought you could lie, cheat, and deceive without consequences. But that power is gone now, because I'm the one holding the cards. Maria placed the recorder back on the table, her fingers lingering over it. This recording, your confessions, it's all I need to destroy you both. I could take this to the police, to your friends, to everyone who ever thought you were decent people. I could ruin your lives with just a few words. Emma gasped, her eyes widening in fear. Maria, please, don't do this. We're sorry. Sorry? Maria's voice was sharp. Sorry doesn't erase what you've done. Sorry doesn't fix the betrayal, the lies, the pain. She stood up, pacing around the room as she spoke, her words measured, deliberate. But here's the thing. I'm not going to the police. I'm not going to expose you. That would be too easy, too quick. No, I want you to live with this, to wake up every day knowing that I have the power to destroy you, and that someday I might just use it. Mark's face went pale, the realization of Maria's plan dawning on him. Maria, please don't do this. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Mark, Maria interrupted, her voice cold. You broke something that can never be repaired, but now you get to live with the consequences. She stopped pacing, turning to face them both, her eyes blazing with determination. You'll stay away from me, from each other. You'll live your lives knowing that at any moment I could bring everything crashing down. That's your punishment. To live in fear, in uncertainty, just like you made me live. The weight of Maria's words settled over the room, the finality of her decision sinking in. Mark and Emma sat in stunned silence, the reality of their situation hitting them with full force. There was no redemption, no forgiveness, only the lingering threat of Maria's vengeance hanging over them like a sword, ready to fall at any moment. Maria picked up the recorder one last time, slipping it into her pocket as she walked toward the door. She paused, turning back to look at them, her expression unreadable. You both took everything from me, she said softly, but in the end, it's you who lost the most. With that, Maria walked out of the cabin, leaving Mark and Emma behind, their lives forever changed by the choices they had made and the woman they had betrayed. Maria left the cabin with an eerie sense of calm. The rage and heartbreak that had consumed her were now replaced with cold resolve. She had taken control of her life, turning the tables on Mark and Emma in a way they could never have foreseen. As she drove away, the woods darkening behind her, Maria felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't naive. The pain of betrayal wouldn't vanish overnight, but she had done what was necessary. She reclaimed her power, forced them to confront their sins, and ensured they would never forget what they had done. Back at home, Maria resumed her life with unsettling normalcy. To the outside world, nothing had changed, but inside she was stronger, more self-reliant, and no longer dependent on anyone for her happiness or self-worth. Mark and Emma, on the other hand, were haunted by their actions. The secret they had once shared became a heavy burden, poisoning every interaction. The guilt and shame were inescapable, gnawing at them day and night. They lived in constant fear that Maria might one day make good on her unspoken threats. Unable to bear the tension, Emma moved away, trying to start over. But the shadow of her past followed her everywhere. Mark remained in the house that had once been his sanctuary, now a prison of regret. His life, once full of confidence, was now ruled by doubt and fear. Maria knew they were suffering, and while she took no joy in their pain, it brought her closure. She had delivered her form of justice, a justice that would linger in their minds for the rest of their lives. And that, in its way, was enough. In the months that followed, Maria rebuilt her life piece by piece. She focused on herself, her career, her hobbies, her happiness. The betrayal had left scars, but Maria was determined not to let it define her. She sought therapy, learned to process her emotions, and found ways to heal. Surrounded by supportive friends, Maria rediscovered the joy of living. For the first time in years, she prioritized her needs and desires. She traveled, explored new interests, and slowly began dating again, allowing herself the time to trust once more. Mark and Emma, however, struggled to move on. Mark's career and relationships crumbled under the weight of guilt, while Emma found it difficult to form meaningful connections. haunted by her past choices. But Maria had no intention of returning to their lives. She had moved on, finding peace in the knowledge that she had faced her darkest hour and survived. The power she once held over them was no longer needed. She had found her strength, and that was enough. In the end, Maria realized that the best revenge wasn't in ruining their lives. It was in living hers to the fullest. And that was her greatest victory.